Hi, Clyde Sharad here from Africa Media Australia. In this interview, I spoke with David Marlow from the Jewish Community Council of Victoria, JCCV in short. We discussed a number of things with David. So the interview comes in three parts. In this first part, we talked about what JCCV does and the dinner that it organized back in May that brought together members of the Jewish community and Africans here in Melbourne. We also discussed the representations of migrant and ethnic groups in the media in Australia in general and Victoria in particular. So then this is the first part. It goes for about 10 minutes. Very interesting conversation. And then the second part of the interview will be published later on. I hope you enjoyed the interview, and I'll see you on the other side. David Marlow, thank you for your time to Africa Media Australia.
No problem, glad to be here.
I'm going to start with a very simple question. Please tell us a bit more about your organisation, the Jewish Community Council of Victoria.
The Jewish Community Council of Victoria is the peak body for Jews in Victoria. We've got about 52,000 Jews in the community, and the organisation started in 1938, so about 78 years ago, and it represents the 52,000 Jews through 54 Jewish community organisations, which are our affiliates. So we combine together 54 community organisations, which include synagogues, Jewish schools, welfare organisations, more social organisations, some semi-political organisations, Jewish care, Jewish museums, and we work on issues of racism and anti-Semitism, on issues of pastoral care services for the community, on LGBTI rights, on social inclusion issues for people with disabilities, and a range of other issues, as well as representing the community to government and Victoria Police, Federal Police if necessary, and we have a federal body which we're part of, and if it's a federal issue we get them to work on it. If it's a state-based issue, we work on it.
When did the Jewish start coming to Australia?
There were Jews on the first fleet as convicts.
All right.
And we've been about the same percentage of the community ever since. Okay. But there was, there's been waves of increases. So, for example, in the 1890s, there were waves from Russia because of the and Eastern Europe because of anti-Semitism and problems with Cossacks and the like, and then pre-war out of Nazi Germany, like my parents came out in 1938, 1939, and then you had big waves of immigration after the war, out of Holocaust survivors, people escaping Europe, and then we've had waves of immigration since from South Africa, from the former Soviet Union, when they were finally allowed out, and more recently Israel's been a little wave.
You organised a dinner in May 2016 that brought together members of the Jewish community in Victoria and members of the African Australian communities in Victoria. What led you to organise that event?
I sit on a number of external committees, like Victoria Police Multicultural Committee, Victoria Police Interfaith Council, State Multi-Faith Advisory Group, and other committees. And often there's some African community representatives, whether it be from South Sudan or from Somalia or Ethiopia, and through talking to those guys, come to understand that we've got a significant African community which is not well understood by the Jewish community, because we tend to, for whatever reason, we tend to live in different suburbs, so we don't have a lot of contact, and a lot of the people from Africa who come over haven't had contact with Jews in their country. So I thought it's an opportunity to create bridges and maybe see what opportunities there are for parts of our community to work with parts of the Australian African community.
So the dinner has worked and people have started having conversations?
Yeah, no, it's terrific. I think it's good to get people talking, and it's good to break down the stereotypes from both sides.
Yes.
And because there's things that the media says about all our communities,
Yes.
which are never positive, and the media, the present media accepted, but the mainstream media don't help in terms of perceptions of the different communities.
That's right.
So it was important, given what's been happening in the media on all sides, it became even more important to do. That's not why we did it, but it became a big plus to at least getting people seeing each other with a different light in a friendly way and positive way, and seeing where we've got common interests.
Talking about the media, why do you think the media is so much interested in negative stories from migrant and ethnic communities, and they don't seem to pay any particular attention, or at least not enough attention, to the very positive stories that are happening within these communities?
We've had this discussion with a lot of newspapers, radio people, journos, and it's very difficult to get them to think past disasters. They like disasters, they like things going wrong, they like problems. Good news doesn't sell papers, and so if something happens, and so for example, if there's a terrorist attack and one person dies in Israel, they don't care. 130 people die in a terrorist attack, so well that's 130, that's really terrible, so they're going to make a big thing about it. If someone in the African community does something nice, it might make the local leader newspaper, but it's not going to make the Age or Herald Sun generally. They want something which is a bit more what they think is newsworthy. And so the bigger the disaster, the bigger the problem. And we try to explain to the media that if the only stories you do about someone from Somalia or someone who's Jewish or someone who's Muslim is negative, then the perception of the general community, who don't necessarily mix with all those other communities, will be negative. And yesterday was the Chief Commissioner's Youth Summit, and some of those issues came up, and the Herald Sun was there, and the Herald Sun editor stood up and spoke, and everyone was... he got off lightly, but the newspapers are a big part of the problem. The TV shows, the news, current affair, those sort of programs, they love the negative stories, and it's very hard to convince them to do something which is a bit positive on some of our communities.
And do you think all of that is simply a natural inclination for the media to be negative, or is there any element of racism in there?
That's a hard one. I think there's definitely an element of racism in there. I don't think the individual journalists are racist. Often the stories that get produced are not necessarily racist when you read them. There are certain commentators or columnists who clearly do have issues on race or religion, but I think generally the journalists aren't. But then when they go to the editor or the sub-editors to do the title of the story, then it gets twisted around or changed to be, and then it could look a lot worse. And the things that'll be changed, they'll highlight the fact that, for example, if someone from an African community does something, they're likely to be said, the person looked African and they were this or that, but they won't say that they were, if it was Catholic, they're not going to say there was someone that was Catholic. Maybe if it was a Catholic priest, they might have a go at them. But I think there's definitely an issue of race, and I think they make certain things seem a lot worse than they are. For example, carjackings. There's always been carjackings. They're bit different now, but it's not like there's hundreds of them every day. So it's gets a disproportionate amount of news. The house breakings gets a disproportionate amount of news, partly because it's a new phenomenon. So people get a bit nervous about those, understandably. But the media makes it out like you feel like every second house is getting broken into. Well, every house has been broken into in my street over the last 30 years. It's not new, but it's new that people are breaking in while the people are still there because they want to steal the car. So there's an element of newsworthiness which makes it different. Whether they would still be reporting it if the kids were from Xavier College, were white, Anglo-Saxon Catholic, I don't know, but I think there's an element of chasing the news, which means chasing the bad stuff, and in some cases the racial element or the religious intolerance gets pushed, and you see that quite a bit in all the mainstream papers and at some level.
Australia rates very well when it comes down to multiculturalism and diversity, but when you look at the media, it has remained defiantly Anglo-Saxon. Why do you think that is the case?
Senior roles in media tend to be very male-dominated as well, so it's not just that they're white Australian Anglo sort of background, but and even when you do get some with a different background, they don't necessarily get into senior enough levels to have much of an influence. But yeah, it's a fair call that at senior media levels and mainstream media is not very representative of the general community. It's like trying to get women into the senior roles. It's very hard to push them. The private enterprises do their own thing. Different in ABC, SBS, you can have an influence on them in the community to get them to be more reflective of the community, which they tend to be. There's a bit more in mainstream media with people like Wally Daly, but then they start to get proportionally too much voice in one person because he's it.
Yes.
But we do have, and it's important in media, not just in the news or current affairs, but also in TV shows, to have the shows reflect more of the general community. Because I think having role models and having all Australians be considered mainstream is really important, and that's what multiculturalism, I think, in Australia is about. That all Australians are mainstream, not just a collection of different multicultural groups that are all separate and don't feel like they belong. It's important that everyone feels like they belong because they do.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that first part of the long interview that I had with David. If you have any questions or any comments, please enter the comments just below this video. Send us email or message through our Facebook page. The second part of the interview will be coming a little bit later in the next few weeks, and we'll continue to publish more stuff that relates to African communities and how we can link up with other groups in the broader society to help advance our communities. Until next time, may God bless you.